Welcome back. If you're just joining us once again, a happy new year to you. Yes, it's Rubbin Minds, and we're going to be talking about the factors that will shape 2023 in politics and the economy. I'm joined now by Jude Ose and Jonathan Ike Olumba. Thanks for being here today. Happy New Year to the both of you.
Same to you.
We can't talk about this year without talking about the elections. It's all we were talking about in the last year plus, and the year is finally here. 2023, February 25th, the general elections are coming. It's probably the most, let me use the word loosely, exciting elections or campaign season we've had, or dynamic. How are you viewing things to come? There are people who are very apprehensive, about how things are going to shape up. It's the first time we're hearing conversations, whether it will happen or not, about a runoff, which is a possibility. People are not sure how that plays out with people's emotions, having to vote twice for the same thing. We've never been there before. I mean, how are you feeling as we're finally in the year, the day is coming close?
It's been amazing. For me, I'm quite very much excited, because this election promises to be one of a kind, with a huge participation of a lot of young people who now know that, elections are important, and it's a must for me to participate in the entire electoral process. I am much more excited about it, actually.
I also find that, I see a new poll every other day.
I know.
And I like polls. I don't necessarily believe them, but I think it kind of gives you a sense of what might be happening or where things might be headed. But I've also found that a lot of people are taking those polls very seriously, and it makes you wonder what that would mean, at the time. What do you think about those polls? Do you think they are healthy enough? Do you think there should be caveats every time I put about to say, okay, this is not the election result. This is, because I see them a lot, and I know the kind of conversations I hear around them.
But Ebuka, the town hall, the thing is, the polls are very important.
Yes.
Usually it's going to give us an idea of what we should expect, right? And to think that, so far, candidates are worried, especially on the outcome of those polls. So it's important that we keep having them, regardless of who is literally pioneering some of these polls. It's important. At least some people now know that I'll have to do much more work, so that I get ahead of some of the polls. And it's really stimulating conversations within this process.
Definitely,
So,
Let me come to you now, because I feel like this election, more than ever, has really brought the economy into the political conversation. One, because of where the economy is right now. We know what's going on, besides the fact that there's no fuel. The price, it wasn't a very Merry Christmas for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a fact. And then, of course, we can't go without talking about the fact that the CBN has been involved policy-wise in a lot of the conversations with politics this year, whether it's in Naira redesign, whether it's restrictions on withdrawal of funds, and even at some point earlier when the CBN governor was started as a candidate, so the CBN has sort of been a part of the conversation heavily, which has brought, the economy into it. Do you think that's healthy, for where things are headed? Because most people would have thought that security would be the topmost conversation as the elections are coming. It looks like the economy might be. How does that make you feel?
I think that the idea around many of these policies, I'll put them as the monetary policies, are actually still, in a way, still linked to some of the things we're anticipating around the election. So, for example, there are lots of conversations around how some of these policies are linked towards things to curb like vote buying. And I think we've not really witnessed in a while, situations where from a monetary policy perspective, it has been used to somewhat gauge or somewhat disrupt what will happen with the election. So that's why it's really coming. And I like the point you mentioned about even the conversation around the CBN governor at a point being a part of, the presidential candidates. So I think that it reflects the moment we are in. So this is like 2022. And I think that if we think about what has really redefined most of our politics quite recently has been the money part of the conversation. So it just makes sense that from a monetary policy perspective, if there's any way to curb issues that might disrupt a successful election that speaks to really the wishes of the people, I think it just makes sense. And I think we're all in agreement that money has been part of that conversation quite recently. So that's why that's happening.
Do you think it will have an effect? Because people have been wondering, does this policy, is it really going to have an effect? We're hearing stories now about the CBN governor not being able to come back. We're not sure what is confirmed or not. I saw a headline about him trying to seek asylum. All those are still in the air. But it's also curious that he's not around. You know, we've been told that he's not feeling well, so that's probably also true. But, you know, does it mean that people are also starting to feel the effects of these policies already? I still haven't seen the new Naira notes. The deadline is on the 31st. I don't know if that can be met. But do you think this is really going to have an effect eventually on how things pan out?
Yes, just for context, so poverty levels have been very high. Statistics shows that about 63% of Nigerians are actually around the poverty threshold. So it only makes sense that if you are running a national election where there's a lot of poverty, so money in a way can somewhat be a deciding factor. I was listening, many of the candidates actually go on political campaigns and make comments like, collect the money, but still vote for who you want to vote. You know, that still shows that you can't somewhat like, you know, take away money from the conversation. But I do think that there's a lot of education, a lot of awareness, usually quite stratas in the space. I mean, so for example, the churches I love very active now. I even hear that some religious organizations actually have political advocacy groups and really speaking to two issues, really. One is, you know, don't let, you know, money decide or influence who you would vote. And more importantly, let's vote for the right candidates. So I think that as much as money will be a deciding factor, with the level of knowledge I'm seeing out there, I don't think I might say repeats of the kind of things where we see, where people tend to let some sort of vote buying, like somewhat, you know, decide, you know, where they'll be voting for. But I do think that money will still be a part of the conversation. These policies should help, you know, gauge that. And for me, what I'm very enthusiastic about these policies, for the very first time, we all get a sense, money might not be a deciding factor.
Or as much of it.
As much of it.
Because it probably will still be. But a question to both of you, let me still stick with you, and I'll come to you about, you know, the candidates themselves and the economic policies that they put out. I don't know if anyone has stood out for you or anything has impressed you. Yes, they're going to make promises, as always, but I'm not sure how many of them will keep them, which is why I talk about, on this show, a lot about being able to hold them accountable eventually. Yeah. But have you seen things that have impressed you to say that, okay, these are realistic goals? From their manifestos, and, you know, things that you are sort of saying, okay, maybe by May 29th we might start, you know, making a detour away from, you know, what people have complained about so far.
So one of the things I'm noticing is the engagement with the citizenry is taking multiple dimensions. So, for example, many of the candidates do town hall sessions, they hold social media chat sessions as well too. They also go to meet different strata. So either they are meeting with the creatives today or they are meeting with the business community tomorrow. You know, somewhat like having a very deeper level of engagement with people. I do think that for once there's a realization that business as usual would not, you know, work in this sort of instance. And I mean, one of the candidates was quoted as saying, you know, please put me on tape for anything I say and be able to play it back, you know, if I get into power, so you can hold me accountable. I think that realization is there. I think that also with the benefits of hindsight now, we've seen that, you know, even when parties make promises that not necessarily really translate to action. So the candidates are finding out ways to just ensure that, you know, they can be more believable, you know, in the eye of the public. And I think that that speaks to the way they're engaging. I think everyone agrees that they're engaging, but what we really want to be sure of is that on the part of the citizenry that will come out and really just do the right thing on that day.
Yeah. What about you? Have you been impressed with especially the economic policies of these candidates to say, okay, I mean, maybe things might start looking up? So
I've reviewed not all of them, maybe just the three big wigs. You know, I've reviewed their manifesto. The one that stood out for me, basically, is, I don't need to mention the candidate's name, so one of them is really big on, you know, converting Nigeria's consumption economic narrative to a producing. And that stood up for me because what it means is that the Nigerian purchasing power parity is going to increase at some point. And then all the currency strength as well is going to increase, because once we increase our exportation capacity, for example, you would have that reflection in the economy and how Nigerians will react to it. So I'm hoping that this is going to not just be a vote buying kind of situation or poverty-driven approach to voting, but people will pay attention to their manifesto and make a decision.
Yeah.
It's very important for the future of Nigeria.
Are you a little disturbed? Because I am, and I think a lot of people are, at the fact that, yes, we have pretty good manifestos by a couple of the candidates. Some of them have been engaging enough. But it looks like the conversation in the public sphere, especially amongst you and I, the citizens, is still about where these people are from, how old they are, where they worship, as against what they will be doing. Why do you think we're still stuck, having these conversations? The moment you ask someone who they want to vote and they tell you, you almost instantly tie it to the fact that they are from there, which is why they chose this way. Why are we still there? Is this something we can share, do you think?
So first off, the Nigerian political space is not driven by ideologies, okay? And this has to do with, and this is a reflection of what the parties also look like. And what makes up the party? The people, right? And these people come back as citizens and discuss, have conversation at home. Now, if assuming there is like an ideology that's driven by the party, it will have a reflection at home, right? But then again, people are not really interested in that. And you cannot talk about Nigeria's political space without being ethnocentric or having religion in it, the entire process. It's very interesting, to see all that play out. However, we are panning away from what is really important, which is, what are we going to do? What are they coming to do? Yeah. What have they done? And for those who perhaps are currently in government, why weren't they able to do X, Y, Z? Will these new people also come with the same kind of strategy? Promise us with a lot of heaven and earth, but at the same time, we'll fall back to where we are right now. Yeah. So I believe that the main conversation should now move to, what are these candidates saying?
Yeah.
What do they have? What role must they play in the economy to stimulate everyone to the growth?
How does that conversation move? Is it the duty of the parties? Because the parties are also guilty. We hear zoning every other sentence that comes out of a party person's mouth. Oh, it was our turn, or it is our turn, or I'm angry because you took it away from us, sort of thing. So it looks like that's the narrative even within the parties and outside, of course, those who are voting. But how do we because it's possible to talk about, okay, this person is from here, but I also like them because of this. To have that sort of all-inclusive conversation. Will debates help, for example? Even though we know that the debate conversation is very debatable now,
For me, I think it's a question of leadership.
It's too late even to have those conversations now. Maybe till the next elections, I don't know.
I even think it's a function of leadership and how we hold our leaders to account. Because I believe that if we truly have a situation where leaders perform, it would matter not. And we always use examples like, when you're in an aircraft, you don't necessarily are interested in, what gender or who the pilot is, or you're just interested in someone who can do a good job of taking me to my destination. So I think the real question is around, how we hold our leaders to account. So you speak about debates. I wish we can also make it mandatory to also have periodic sessions where we can have like a sort of accountability sessions with these leaders.
That's when they're in office. No?
Yeah, when they're in office. Make it somewhat like very mandatory, and how we can enforce that. Maybe every 6 months or every year, hold those kind of conversations. If we keep it on leadership, if we keep it on accountability, I think that many of these narrative around zoning or narrative around where you're from might somewhat, go down or die a bit. That's my own thinking, really.
Yeah, because I know we used to have the presidential media chats. I mean, they were not constitutionally, ingrained, but that sort of at least kept us asking questions.
Yes.
Even if you're not getting results, at least you're being engaged. Yeah. But I don't know if we've had that in quite a while now. So, as the elections are coming now, there's excitement in the air, like you said. A lot of young people are participating differently. People are engaged. People are talking about PVCs and all of that. All of that energy, people are hoping will be channeled to the actual elections. Do you worry that can be misplaced? And I'm saying this very carefully because there's always a talk about the fact that it's almost impossible to have violent, free elections in Nigeria. And I think it's important to remind people that this is just about the ballots. And there's no guarantee that whoever you vote must win. I don't know how we can have those conversations to let people understand that you vote, you protect your votes. If your candidate doesn't win, you wait till the next time. You know,
Right.
do you see that that energy is correctly being channeled?
So first things first. Prior to now, it was inevitable, you know, to have like more like violent-free elections, right?
Yeah.
But right now, moving forward, and I would like to commend INEC for the beavers machine that they've introduced into the electoral process. You know, the reason why violence usually occurs is because they want to snatch the ballot boxes, right?
Now, snatching it is supposed to be pointless.
Exactly. So now snatching is now pointless because with the beavers machine, it's with the entire structure of it, it's supposed to accredit voters and at the same time a means of transmission of the results. So as it is today, I don't want to say this, what should be at stake will be the beavers machine itself. You understand? You understand? So yeah, and I'm hoping that everyone, at the same time, if you are going to be snatching away a beavers machine, you'll be snatching away the polling officers themselves because they need, you have to authorize some things for that to go to INEC's portal. So it's different this time around. And people need to know, and I was saying it the other day within a closed-up meeting with INEC officials, and I'm saying that voters' education is very important. The voters must know that this election is different. INEC on the other side has provided different mechanisms to protect the voters and also created a system to ensure that our elections are actually credible. You know, so
let's leave politics a bit and, you know, talk about the economy, because the economy is, people are really going through it. Like I said at the start of this, it's a brand new year now.
Yeah.
People are even more worried that there's so many distractions. The elections are coming. We're hearing talks about a possible census that's going to happen. So it looks like government is going to be expending funds on these things much more than, you know, what people think matter, which is, you know, food on our table. Is it going to be a bleak year economically, you think, for the country? Because like I said, the world is going through it. Nigeria is not an island, but we also have our peculiar problems as well that are tied to, you know, this.
So every election year really has its implications as well too for the economy. A very good way to look at it is prior to an election year, that you would normally find a drop in capital movement into the country, and that's because potential investors want to wait and see and be sure of the direction of the political leadership of the country. So to that extent, there's a lot of cautiousness. I think in Q1, and the good thing is the election has been slated for February, so there will be a lot of you know, caution on the part of most capital providers just to see or get a sense of the direction of where the economy is going to. But more importantly is what we can see that is already out there. So for example, the budget has been passed into law, and we have a fair idea of what the budget will cover, regardless of who comes in, right? So there will be some sort of document for us to see. Also too, very important is the Finance Act as well too, that goes hand in hand with the budget. And there are quite a lot of interesting things in the Finance Act that would also speak to tax efficiency in terms of collection of taxes as well too. Also covering technology companies and companies that are usually not headquartered in the country, just increasing the tax bracket as well too for people. Also things around companies that do have a sort of social affiliation, but once they are registered as a company now, whether you are affiliated with a religious organization or a cooperative or a friendly sort of activity, you'll be subjected to company income tax. So there are those documents that we can see that already, you know, passed into law that, you know, can give us a sense of where the country will be going into. But just to say that an election year is always, you know, associated with a bit of caution. What I would think, you know, from an economic perspective, as we enter into we're in 2023, as we go deep into 2023, will just be a situation where the election activities goes on smoothly. We pray that there will be no violence. We pray that, you know, just a smooth transition, you know, from one administration to another administration, and let the conversation just be around, you know, improving the economy, because there are quite a lot of very deep issues, you know, whether it's around tackling corruption, whether it's around improving employment, whether it's around, you know, dealing with the FX volatility as well too.
What do you think, sorry to cut you, what do you think is the one thing that can be the quickest fix this year? Because like you said, there's so many things. You know, what can we count as a win soonest that you think government should think about, or the next government? Whether it's the FX, you know, people have talked about merging both regimes of, you know, FX. Does that help? You know, people have talked about devaluing the naira, deregulating the oil market. Like, what should we count on and say, okay, this would actually shift things this year?
Okay, so I'll go to the fundamentals, I'll go to the legacy issues. I think our legacy economic issue in the country is around our crude oil production. For me, is the crude oil production, dealing with issues around oil theft and that sector. Because our, single biggest revenue earner for us has always been our oil production. So I think that if we can make progress on that, this year was associated with a massive drop in oil production, also associated with serious oil theft. You would have seen a couple of the reports around that. If we can deal with that, that at least will speak to revenues, you know, coming to the country. And if we have significant revenues, at least we are guaranteed that, you know, our budget, you know, to some extent can be largely implemented, you know, even though it's a deficit budget, but at least the revenues will be there. So if you wanted me to nail it to one issue, would be that, you know, let's just focus on, you know, oil production. Global issues with the Russia-Ukraine war doesn't help, but for me, I think that's the biggest way we can somewhat, you know, deal with our economic problems. All right. If we can deal with that.
Very, very quickly now, are you excited, hopeful about February? I
am. I cannot wait for February. I cannot wait.
We all can't wait. I can't wait for it to pass. So hopefully we can move on to greater things. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I wish you the best in 2023.
Don't just stand